I've been a private investigator for 17 years, and I've seen things that would make most people question their faith in humanity. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the morning I got the call about Julian Ashford. The name alone should have been a warning. Ashford Gold, Ashford Mining Corporation, Ashford bloody everything. When you control that much wealth, that much power, death doesn't come quietly. It comes with questions that have no right answers. It was 6:47 a.m. when my phone vibrated against the nightstand. The number was blocked, but I answered anyway. That's the curse of this job. You always answer. A woman's voice, clinical and detached, told me there had been an incident at the Ashford estate. That's what she called it. An incident. Like someone had spilled wine on an expensive rug. She said the family requested me specifically, that discretion was paramount, and that a car would arrive in 20 minutes. I didn't ask questions. When families like the Ashfords call, you don't ask questions. You just show up and try not to drown in their secrets. The estate was 40 minutes outside the city, nestled in the kind of landscape that doesn't exist naturally. Too perfect, too manicured, too deliberate. The driveway alone was longer than most streets I grew up on. Black iron gates opened automatically as we approached, and I caught my first glimpse of the main house. It wasn't a house, it was a monument. Glass and stone and angles that seemed designed to intimidate. The kind of architecture that says we have so much money we can make geometry itself bow to us. A woman met me at the entrance. Mid-40s, blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, wearing a black pantsuit that probably cost more than my car. She introduced herself as Sienna Ashford, Julian's wife. Her hand was cold when we shook and her eyes were dry. Not a tear, not a tremor. Just this hollowed-out calm that made my skin crawl. "He's in the back," she said, already turning away. "The pool." I followed her through hallways lined with paintings I couldn't name but knew were worth fortunes. The smell hit me before we even stepped outside. Chlorine mixed with something else, something organic and wrong. The pool stretched out before us, an infinity edge that seemed to pour directly into the valley below. And there, floating face down near the shallow end, was Julian Ashford. I've seen drowning victims before. The bloating, the discoloration, the way the skin starts to separate from the flesh. Julian had been in that water for at least 18 hours, maybe more. His white shirt had ballooned around his torso, and his arms were spread wide like he'd been trying to embrace the water itself. I crouched at the edge, studying him without touching, and that's when Sienna spoke again. "The panic room is still active," she said. Her voice was flat, mechanical. "His biometrics, they're still registering." I turned to look at her. "What do you mean, still registering?" "His heartbeat, his breathing, the system in his panic room. It tracks his vitals. It's been recording them continuously since last night, since before we found him here." I felt something cold slide down my spine. "That's not possible." "I'm aware," she said, and there was the faintest edge of something in her voice. Not grief, not fear, something closer to exhaustion. "That's why you're here, Mr. Callahan. To explain the impossible." The panic room was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a corridor that required 3 separate security clearances to access. Sienna walked me through each checkpoint with the tired efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The final door was reinforced steel, biometric locks glowing soft blue in the dim light. A small screen beside it showed vital signs. Heart rate, respiratory rate, blood oxygen levels. All active, all consistent with someone alive and resting inside. "When did you last see your husband?" I asked. "Yesterday evening, around 8. He said he was going to work in his study, then retire to the panic room. He'd been sleeping there for the past month." She paused, and for the first time, something flickered across her face. We weren't on the best terms. "And this morning?" "The housekeeper found him at 6. She went out to skim the pool, and there he was. She called me immediately. I checked the panic room system before I called you. It showed him inside, alive." I stared at the screen. The heartbeat was steady. 72 beats per minute. Absolutely normal. Absolutely impossible. I need to see inside, I said. Sienna shook her head. The room only opens to Julian's biometrics. We can't override it without his authorization. That was the point. Absolute security. Not even I could get in if he didn't want me to. Then we need to bring in a tech specialist, someone who can… No. Her voice turned sharp, crystalline. No outside people. The family's reputation. Your husband is dead in your pool while his heart is apparently still beating in a locked room, I said, and I didn't try to keep the edge from my voice. Reputation is the least of your concerns right now. She met my eyes then, really met them, and I saw something flicker in their depths. Not grief, not shock. Something calculating and cold and very, very aware. Do what you need to do, she said finally, but quietly. I spent the next 3 hours going through security footage. The Ashford estate had cameras everywhere, exterior, interior, even the goddamn gardens. I sat in the security office with a man named Graves, head of their private security team, and we watched Julian's last known movements. 8:14 p.m. Julian enters his study on the second floor. He's wearing dark slacks and the white shirt he'd later die in. His movements are agitated, aggressive. He's on the phone, pacing back and forth in front of the window. I couldn't hear the conversation, but his body language screamed rage. 9:37 p.m. Julian exits the study and heads toward the panic room corridor. He's alone. His face is flushed, and he's carrying something. A small box, dark wood, ornate hinges. 9:41 p.m. Julian enters the panic room. The door seals behind him. The biometric system activates. His vitals appear on screen. Elevated heart rate, rapid breathing, consistent with stress or anger. And then nothing. The hallway outside remains empty through the night. No one approaches. No one leaves. At 6:03 a.m., the housekeeper's scream echoes through the east wing and the day explodes into chaos. What about exterior cameras? I asked Graves. Pool area? He pulled up the feeds. The pool was visible from 3 angles. I watched the water remain undisturbed through the night, until suddenly, at 4:47 a.m., there was Julian. Just there, floating. No approach, no splash, no movement in the preceding frames. One moment the pool was empty. The next he was in it. Dead. That's not possible, I said more to myself than to Graves. No, he agreed. It's not. I met the rest of the family in the main drawing room, a space so vast and cold it felt more like a museum than a home. Sienna was there, perched on the edge of a white sofa, like a bird ready to take flight. Beside her sat Mira, Julian's daughter. 23, dark hair cut in a severe bob, wearing black jeans and a leather jacket that screamed rebellion in a house built on tradition. Her eyes were red, but whether from crying or lack of sleep, I couldn't tell. He deserved it, she said when I asked about her relationship with her father. Just like that, no preamble, no hesitation. He was a monster. Mira, Sienna's voice was sharp. No, Mom, he wants to know, fine. Dad controlled everything. Every dollar, every decision, every breath we took. Last week he told me I was cut out of the will because I refused to marry the son of his business partner. He said I was a disappointment, that I'd never be worthy of the Ashford name. She laughed, bitter and brittle. And now he's dead. And I'm supposed to pretend I'm sad about it. Where were you last night? I asked. Here, in my room, alone, crying myself to sleep like a goddamn child because my father just erased me from existence. She stood abruptly. Are we done? Not quite. Your brother, Dax, where is he? Something passed between Sienna and Mira then. A look, quick but loaded. Europe, Sienna said. He's been touring through Italy and France. Motorcycle trip. He left 3 weeks ago. Have you contacted him about Julian's death? We tried. He's not answering. That seem odd to you? Sienna's jaw tightened. Dax and his father had a complicated relationship. When he left, they'd just had another fight. About the business. About Dax's lifestyle. Julian thought motorcycles and travel were beneath an Ashford. Dax thought Julian was a tyrant. Sounds like Julian wasn't winning any Father of the Year awards, I said. Julian built an empire, Sienna replied, and there was steel in her voice now. He provided everything for this family: wealth, security, legacy. If his children couldn't appreciate that, it wasn't his failing. And you, did you appreciate it? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I married him, didn't I? I spent the afternoon tracking down Grayson Vane, Julian's business partner. He was in the city, in an office tower bearing the Ashford Vane logo. The man who greeted me was younger than I expected. Mid-40s, silver hair, expensive suit, exhausted eyes. He offered me scotch, which I declined, then poured himself 3 fingers and downed it in one swallow. Julian's dead, he said, statement not question. Yes. Good. He poured another glass. That sounds cold. Maybe it is. But Julian Ashford destroyed everything he touched, including our partnership. Last month he made a deal with a competitor, sold them access to our geological surveys, our mining projections, everything. Cost me $40 million and 10 years of work. When I confronted him, he laughed. Actually laughed. Said it was just business. Where were you last night? Home, alone, drinking. I've been drinking a lot lately. He met my eyes. You think I killed him? Did you? I wanted to. God knows I wanted to, but I didn't have to. Julian was a man surrounded by enemies. Every person in his life had a reason to want him dead. His wife, his children, his business partners, the people who worked for him. He treated everyone like tools to be used and discarded. The real question isn't who killed him, it's who got to him first. By evening, I was back at the estate. A tech specialist I trusted, a woman named Torres who'd worked with me on cases where discretion was non-negotiable, arrived with equipment to bypass the panic room's biometric lock. It took her 4 hours of careful, methodical work while I watched the monitor showing Julian's steady, impossible heartbeat. At 9:23 p.m., the door finally opened with a hiss of pressurized air. The panic room was maybe 12 by 15 feet. Steel walls, reinforced door, a cot in one corner, a small desk with monitors showing security feeds. And in the center of the room, sitting on the desk, was a biometric simulator, a sophisticated piece of equipment designed to replicate human vital signs. Connected to it was a recording device. Someone programmed this to loop his vitals, Torres said, examining it. Took his real biometric data, probably from weeks ago, and set it to play continuously. The system thought he was in here because technically his biological signature was. I stared at the device. Could Julian have set this up himself? Possible. If he wanted to fake being in here while he went somewhere else, or someone else set it up to create an alibi. I turned to look at the monitors on the wall. Every security camera in the house fed into this room. Julian could watch everyone from here, including whoever might have killed him. I spent that night going through Julian's computer. His files were encrypted, but Torres broke through, and what we found painted a picture of a man absolutely paranoid and absolutely justified in that paranoia. He'd been investigating his own family, Dax's finances, loans taken out against his inheritance, debts to dangerous people, Mira's communications, plans to expose Julian's business practices to journalists, documents about unsafe mining conditions he'd covered up, Sienna's private accounts, money being funneled to offshore holdings, meetings with divorce attorneys. And then there were the videos. Hours of footage from hidden cameras throughout the house. Julian had been watching everyone. I saw Dax in Julian's office weeks ago, screaming at his father, calling him a murderer for what happened at the gold mines in Africa. I saw Mira crying in the garden while on the phone with someone, saying she wished he would just die already. I saw Sienna meeting with Grayson Vane in a hotel downtown. Their conversation intense and intimate in ways that suggested their partnership extended beyond business. But the most disturbing footage was from 3 nights ago. Julian in his study, speaking into his phone. I know what you're all planning, he said, his voice hoarse. I've known for months, but I'm smarter than all of you. I've made arrangements. If anything happens to me, anything, everyone pays. He ended the call and opened the dark wooden box I'd seen him carry into the panic room. Inside was a revolver. The next morning I requested Dax's travel records from Sienna. She hesitated, then provided them. According to his passport, he'd entered Italy 3 weeks ago, but his credit card showed charges in the city, our city, as recently as 2 days ago. Gas station, hardware store, a hotel 6 miles from the Ashford estate. Your son wasn't in Europe, I told Sienna. Her face remained perfectly composed. That's impossible. His credit card says otherwise. Someone checked into a hotel under his name 2 days before Julian died. Want to tell me why your son would lie about his location? I don't know. Where is he now, really? She stood and walked to the window, looking out over the pool where Julian's body had been removed hours before. He called this morning. He's coming home. He'll be here tonight. Dax Ashford arrived at 8 p.m. riding a motorcycle that sounded like thunder. He was tall, lean, tattooed, everything his father apparently despised. He pulled off his helmet and I saw grief in his eyes, real, raw grief that his sister hadn't shown. He's really dead? His voice cracked. Yes. Good. But the way he said it was different from everyone else. Not vindictive, relieved. He was going to kill us, all of us. I found evidence, documents he'd hidden. He'd set up something with his lawyers. Some kind of dead man's switch. If he died, certain information would be released. Information that would destroy us. Business dealings, cover-ups, bribes. Things that would put us all in prison. Why would he do that? Control. Even from beyond the grave, that's who he was, but I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't let him destroy Mira or Mom or even Grayson. They were all just trying to survive him. So you came back to stop him. Dax met my eyes. I came back to talk to him, to beg him, but when I got here, to that hotel, I couldn't do it. I just sat there for 2 days, trying to work up the courage, and then it was too late. Your father was afraid of someone, I said. He was sleeping in his panic room. He had a gun. Who was he afraid of? Everyone? Dax said simply. He'd made enemies of everyone who ever loved him. The pieces were there, scattered like broken glass, but I couldn't make them form a picture that made sense. Julian had set up the biometric loop himself. I was certain of that now. He wanted people to think he was in the panic room while he went somewhere else. But where? And why end up in the pool? I went back to the security footage, watching the pool angles frame by frame, and then I saw it. At 4:46 a.m., 1 minute before Julian appeared in the water, there was a shadow, just for a moment, a distortion in the water's surface near the infinity edge, and at the bottom of the pool, barely visible, a darker patch. There's a drain, Graves said when I asked. Connects to the filtration system. There's access from below, maintenance tunnel. It runs under the property. We found the entrance in the basement, hidden behind wine racks. The tunnel was narrow, dark, smelling of chlorine and earth. It led to the pool's filtration room where pumps churned water through massive tanks. And there, hung on a pipe, was a wetsuit. He came up through the pool, I said, the realization hitting like ice water. Julian faked being in the panic room, went through these tunnels, and entered through the bottom of the pool. But why? Torres examined the wetsuit, then pointed to the pool's edge visible through a small window. The infinity edge. From this angle, from below, you can access the edge without being seen on camera. There's a blind spot. So he was meeting someone he didn't want recorded, or someone he was trying to trap. We reviewed the timeline again. Julian's biometric simulator started at 9:41 p.m. He went into the panic room, set it up, then used the tunnels to reach the pool area unseen, waited in the water maybe, or on the edge, waiting for someone. But who? I found the answer in Julian's safe, which Torres finally cracked at 2 a.m. Inside was a letter, handwritten, dated the day before he died. To whoever finds this, I, Julian Ashford, am setting a trap. Someone in my family plans to kill me. I've narrowed it down, but I need proof. Tonight, I've told each of them separately that I'll be meeting them at different locations. Sienna in my study, Grayson at the pool house, Mira in the garden, Dax at the garage. I've told each that I have evidence of their betrayal and that they have one chance to explain before I destroy them. Only one will show up where I actually am. Only one is desperate enough, guilty enough, to come. And when they do, I'll have my proof. The cameras may not see the pool's edge, but I've installed a hidden device that will record everything. I'm not in the panic room. I'm at the infinity edge, waiting. If you're reading this, I suppose they succeeded. But you'll have the recording. You'll know the truth. I stood in that cold basement and felt the weight of it. Julian had orchestrated his own potential murder to expose his killer. But something had gone wrong. Catastrophically wrong. We found the recording device exactly where Julian said it would be. Waterproofed, hidden in the stone border of the infinity edge. I watched the footage on Torres's laptop, and my blood went cold. 4:32 a.m. Julian emerges from the water near the edge wearing the wetsuit. He pulls himself partially out, waiting, watching. 4:39 a.m. A figure approaches, too dark to see clearly but smaller, moving carefully. 4:40 a.m. Julian speaks. I knew you'd come. His voice is bitter, triumphant. I knew it was you. The figure steps closer, and Julian's expression changes. Confusion, then fear. No, that's not... How did you... And then he's being pushed. Not violently, almost gently, back into the water. He thrashes, tries to grab the edge, but his hands slip. The wetsuit fills with water, pulling him down. He fights for maybe 30 seconds before he stops moving. The figure watches until Julian floats face down. Then they walk away, back into darkness. I rewound the footage, enhanced it as much as I could. When the figure briefly passed through a sliver of moonlight, I caught a glimpse of their face. It was Julian. My hands shook as I paused the frame. It was impossible. Julian drowning in the pool while Julian pushed him in. Two people who looked identical. Unless... I pulled up Julian's files again, searched for medical records, found them buried in encrypted folders. And there it was, adoption records. A twin brother, separated at birth, given up because the family couldn't handle two heirs. A brother named Marcus Ashford who'd grown up in foster care, in poverty, while Julian inherited everything. More files. Private investigator reports Julian had commissioned 6 months ago. Marcus had found him. Marcus had been watching. Marcus had been planning. The final piece was in Julian's journal, a physical book hidden in his desk. I found him, my brother, my twin. He approached me 3 months ago, demanded half of everything. The company, the estate, the fortune. Said he had just as much right to the Ashford name. I refused. He threatened to expose me, to claim his inheritance legally. I couldn't let that happen. So I set a trap, told him I'd meet him to discuss terms. But I planned to record him, get evidence of extortion, have him arrested. I never imagined he'd be smart enough to turn it on me. I never imagined he'd be willing to kill me. But Marcus hadn't just killed Julian. He'd replaced him. I looked at the biometric simulator, understanding flooding through me. Marcus had somehow obtained Julian's biological data weeks before, set up the simulator to make everyone think Julian was safely in the panic room, while Marcus met his brother at the pool. Marcus, wearing identical clothes, similar enough in appearance after 30 years apart. He'd pushed Julian into the water, let him drown, then disappeared back into the tunnels. When the housekeeper found the body, everyone assumed it had been there all night. No one questioned it because the panic room said Julian was alive. By the time I'd arrived, Marcus was gone. But was he? I found Sienna in the drawing room. She looked up as I entered, and I saw it then, the knowledge in her eyes. She'd known. Maybe not everything, but something. When did you find out about Marcus? I asked. She didn't pretend to misunderstand. 2 months ago. Julian was paranoid, distracted. I hired someone to follow him. They discovered the brother. I confronted Julian and he told me everything. Told me he was going to eliminate the threat. You let him walk into a trap. I didn't know Marcus would kill him. I thought Julian would handle it like he handled everything else. ruthlessly, efficiently. I didn't know. She trailed off, and for the first time I saw real emotion crack through her perfect facade. I didn't know Julian would lose. Where's Marcus now? Gone. He only wanted one thing, proof that he was Julian's brother. DNA, documents, legitimacy. He found what he needed and left. You're letting him go? What choice do I have? She stood, walked to the window. If Marcus comes forward publicly, he'll destroy everything. The company, the family name, the inheritance. We'd spend years in court. The scandal would ruin us. Or he stays hidden, takes nothing, and we all move on with our lives. Which would you choose, Mr. Callahan? I stared at her. He murdered your husband. My husband was planning to murder him first. The only difference is competence. She turned back to me. You'll write your report. You'll say Julian drowned, an accident, maybe suicide. The family was under strain. He was stressed, not sleeping well. He went to the pool in the middle of the night and tragically drowned. The panic room malfunction was just that, a malfunction. These things happen. And if I don't? Then you'll find that working against families like ours is a very lonely, very dangerous profession. No threat in her voice, just fact. You'll be paid handsomely for your discretion, and you'll never speak of this again. I should have said no. Should have gone to the police, exposed everything. But standing in that cold mansion, looking at a woman who just lost her husband and felt nothing, I understood something Julian had never grasped. The real power wasn't in the gold, or the companies, or the fortune. It was in the willingness to let go, to sacrifice truth for survival. I wrote the report Sienna wanted. Julian Ashford, deceased by accidental drowning. No foul play suspected. The panic room biometric failure was determined to be a system glitch, explained away by technical experts the family hired. The case closed in 3 days. Marcus Ashford vanished into whatever life he'd built away from the family that had abandoned him. Dax returned to Europe, this time for real. Mira was reinstated in the will. Sienna saw to that. Grayson Vane got his $40 million back from Julian's estate. Everyone moved on. Except me. I still see Julian sometimes, in that moment on the recording. The confusion in his eyes when he realized the person at the edge wasn't who he expected. The fear when he understood he'd miscalculated, set a trap, and walked into a worse one. He'd spent his whole life controlling everything, manipulating everyone, and in the end, he was killed by a ghost he'd created. A brother cast aside before Julian ever knew he existed. There's a certain poetry in that, a certain justice. But it doesn't make me sleep any better. Because here's what haunts me. Julian died in that pool, but his heartbeat kept going in that room. A simulation, yes, but also a perfect metaphor. Even dead, the powerful leave traces. Echoes. Legacies that keep beating long after the person is gone, and sometimes those echoes are louder than the life ever was. I kept one piece of evidence. The wooden box from Julian's panic room. Inside, the revolver is still loaded. I keep it in my desk drawer, a reminder that sometimes the people we're trying to protect ourselves from are the ones we've wronged so deeply they have no choice but to become our executioners. The Ashford case taught me that impossibilities are just puzzles we haven't solved yet. That families built on gold are really built on graves. That power corrupts not just the powerful, but everyone who touches it, including investigators who take their money and bury their truths. So here's my question for you, the one that keeps me awake at night. If you could commit the perfect crime by letting someone else take the fall for it, would you? If you knew the victim was guilty of worse, if you knew their death might save others, if you knew you'd never be caught, would you do it? Would you let justice take the shape of murder and call it righteousness? Leave your answer in the comments. Tell me if I'm complicit. Tell me if Marcus was right. Tell me if there's any difference between the man who pulls the trigger and the man who loads the gun and walks away. Subscribe to this channel and leave your like for more stories of crimes, secrets of powerful families, and investigations that no one dares to tell until the next case.